Hello and welcome back to Product Drive 2025. I'm Jessica Sitabaca, the Director of Demand Gen here at UserPilot. I'll be your host for this talk, but I'm going to give it a couple minutes to let a few more people join. I did that a little early last time, so we missed a few people at the intro. So bear with us just a minute. Okay. I'll try to get started right at 1:50. Okay, I'll go ahead and get started here. All right, once again, welcome back to Product Drive 2025. Again, this is Jessica, the Director of Demand Gen here at UserPilot. Over the last 2 days, we've heard from product leaders and growth experts about how AI is reshaping things. And we have some more fun and interesting things to talk about today here with Jacob Boneta. But before I introduce him, a quick plug for us again. If you're not already aware, UserPilot is an AI-enabled product growth platform that automatically captures user behavior and events. It generates custom dashboards and allows product teams to easily build powerful in-app engagements. So you no longer need developer support to be able to really create engaging opportunities for your users. Yesterday, we introduced our new product growth agent, Leah. To celebrate, every Product Drive attendee gets a free 3-month proof of concept of our platform. So details will be in your inbox after the event. Be sure to add questions in the chat today, in the Q&A. We will address them after, and we'll have Jacob go ahead and answer those questions. In the meantime, let me go ahead and get Jacob set up here. Jacob Boneta is the growth manager at Grafana Labs, where he designs and scales onboarding and monetization systems that drive usage and revenue across Grafana's LGTM stack. Previously, Jacob helped IBM modernize the digital experience for Watson Health and led growth programs for direct-to-consumer brands and early-stage startups. He also held growth leadership and advisory roles at Routable, Chargeify, and International Currency LLC, as well as the founding of Covert Dog. Jacob's expertise lies in architecting growth loops that integrate AI, automation, and user data to move users towards value. His current focus is on how AI is transforming product-led growth from accelerating hypothesis validation to scaling experiments that actually work. Please join me in welcoming Jacob.
Hello, hello. Yeah, thank you guys. Jessica, I appreciate the intro. As Jessica said, so I'm Jacob Boneta. I'm a growth manager at Grafana Labs. We mentioned a little bit about what I do, but specifically I'm working on lifecycle marketing comms, both in and out of the Grafana self-serve experience. So think of growth experiments for onboarding, monetization, and let's say emails for all of our self-serve customers, depending on their lifecycle step. So today, what I wanted to talk about is this idea around writing strategy docs and whether or not we should continue doing them or something else. So as a quick gut check, I want you to think about, let's call it the last 12 months. How many times did you write or review a strategy doc to get somebody's buy-in? Was it a few? Was it a dozen or so? I want you to pick a number. I want you to keep it in your head. Hold on to it for the entirety of this presentation. But most teams still kick off a new feature or growth idea with a Google Doc or some version of it. That's usually the first artifact that ultimately becomes the work. And a lot of the time, that is where momentum goes to die. I don't know about you, but in my experience, these long docs can get very long. In some of my previous experiences, we'd have 20+ page docs describing what we wanted to do. But they're effectively killing that momentum or any fire that you had for that idea. If you're like me, you've had that experience of getting super excited about a project, idea, hypothesis, thinking through it, then hitting that inevitable wall of writing it up. You're describing it as best as you can. You're circulating across multiple stakeholders, all of which they definitely have their questions. And more importantly, they have their own ideas to prioritize. All of this is in hopes of getting their buy-in, getting them to help you build something that you're excited for, or the business is excited for. Maybe in a few months, you get to do the thing. And in some instances, maybe you don't. The talk that I want to have today is around that there is a better way. That in 2025, the teams that win, they aren't writing more. They're shipping more. And how AI has finally allowed us to kill the paperwork this year. And in my opinion, it's the best thing that's ever happened to builders like us. So today I'm going to show you why. But before I move on, another quick mental rep. I want you to picture one project that you're working on right now that is potentially stuck in that doc loop. Now, if you had 24 hours to make some version of an MVP, a proof of concept, instead of another draft in a doc, consider, what would you build? Who is potentially that one user or one customer that you'd want to show and get some validation for? What is a single signal that would tell you that it's worth an iteration on this? Lock those in, hold on to them, we'll use them again. So again, the killer momentum is a very long doc. I see the irony in presenting a doc or presenting a slides on the idea of not presenting slides to prove your point. But not too long ago, I've had these experiences of was working on some big teams with a lot of blue goo. If you know that reference, you know what I'm talking about. But working on teams that anytime any changes, website, product, features, or otherwise, all of these changes were requests, and they were always done and funneled through some product team. Consisted of product managers, designers, developers. What kind of sucked is that it seemed like there was an entirely different product team for each ask. Why that's important. They all had different expectations of what you needed to deliver or get them to get on their backlog. So every time I needed, let's say, even something as simple as a CTA, right, a button built for a page, I had to find the right PMs. I had to then look up their request template. They all had different ones. I had to write it, get feedback from them, and then apply all of that feedback and send it back to hopefully a backlog for design and engineering. At this point, by the time we got to design and engineering, it would go through more rounds of feedback. This all sounds great, but it is the way that we work, right? The majority of the time, at the end of the day, what these docs are trying to do is they're just trying to help other people understand what we're asking for, how it would work, why it's a good solution, and I'm just trying to explain it to them. I've done this so many times that there was actually one experience that really opened my eyes here. That at one point a developer came to me after this long multi-week process of getting buy-in from these teams. They sat me down in a separate meeting and basically was just like, hey, can you draw this? Can you get on a piece of paper, draw a few boxes, some squiggly lines to kind of add some notes, take a picture, and then add it for the doc. He really just wanted to see it. He wanted to visualize it. to the best that he could. So what that meant is every new idea that I had sat in limbo for weeks before it ever even made it to the guy who ultimately just wanted a sticky note drawing of it. I believe this is because docs aren't as actionable as they could be. And async feedback in writing is really hard to clarify, to apply. Docs are difficult to read, and they often require a good imagination. And if anyone who needs to be aligned is lacking in that communication or that imagination, your doc is basically just frustrating. So at the end of the day, people just want proof. They want to see it. They want to potentially touch it before they have an opinion on it. So they just want to see what you mean. They don't necessarily need to read it. It's like anything else. You wouldn't necessarily hire an engineer because they're really good at writing about their code. You wouldn't hire a designer because they have a knack for describing what their mockups look like. So why do we make these product or growth decisions that way? I had a friend recently tell me, works at another company, told me about two of their interns who are the last 2 weeks. And they were demoing an MVP that they had built during an all hands. It was this totally scrappy, built in a few days, vibe coded, messy MVP. But at the end of the day, the room still lost it. And the only thing that leadership could ask was, when can we sell this? In my opinion, the kicker there is that if they had just written a doc, no one would have really cared. Probably would have gotten stored away, would have never heard about them, and would have gone nowhere. So docs spark opinions, prototypes can spark buy-in. The next time somebody asks you for a strategy doc, just consider building the thing instead, and then show it. I believe that's how you get your conviction. In my world, there's an example recently where there's a ton of growth experimentation that we do, and with that comes a ton of hypothesis and debating hypothesis. This is in Slack threads, docs. We're just trying to build validation, right? There's a lot of should we's, should we nots, and not necessarily a lot of signal. So the old way to build these projects, something to improve that process, would have been for me to build requirements, stakeholder review, maybe a ticket to investigate. But instead, I was able to build a hypothesis validator in about a week. It was a simple Slack bot agent that took inputs of what was a hypothesis and pulled in some recent go-to-market data around like call notes, some experiment results in the past, and then returned a short validate or falsify take, plus some additional summary details. It was rough, but it did work. And what it ultimately did was change the perspective of whether or not somebody wanted to build and buy into this more on my teams. People were able to react to the product itself and my vision for it, not necessarily like the paragraphs of what I've tried to describe. And basically those next steps wrote themselves. So the lesson that I gained from that was like, well, what if I could vibe code an 80% experiment that communicates my intent? Am I skipping 3 meetings? Am I skipping 2 weeks of effort? Am I saving time? So my take on the new way of working is to ship, share, and repeat, right? You're going to build the prototype first. You're then going to share it and get that feedback, whether it's from the stakeholders or the users themselves. You're going to get some measurable results, and they're just going to keep repeating it. It's faster because you're iterating every time. You're giving something real to react and interact with instead of another round of what I would consider just opinions. Working prototype also will answer half of the questions that people have before they even get the chance to ask. Whereas in a doc, we don't quite see that today. I kind of get this theory behind all of this is like volume beats certainty. When you spend a long time discussing and what ifing in a doc, you can feel certain your plan is solid, but you're still hoping. You still haven't quite validated. when you iterate on a prototype again and again, you're also not failing. You're tightening the signal, and every round shows you what matters, what moves the metric, ultimately what doesn't. And that's how you get to certainty faster. But this way of working, it's not about being right. It's more about getting in more chances, more reps. I'm an ex-musician. I was in a rock band, toured the US with some cool bands. And in music, one of the things they primarily teach you is just you need to write 100 really bad songs to find at least one good one. I believe it's the same in growth. Most of what we try will likely be mid, and that's okay. The win is when you get to that true growth lever faster and cheaper. So speed compounds. If you can get one extra experiment live per week, even a tiny one, you add what, 40, 50 shots additionally in that year. Again, most of them will be mid, but that a few of them will be decent, and then one will be a step change. And that's the point. You create 10 landing page drafts in hopes that one converts. You create 5 onboarding tweaks, maybe one kills some drop off. There's 3 pricing mocks, one unlocks conversions. There are small bets, tight loops, and cheap chips. So you don't have to find your hit by theorizing in a doc. You find it by shipping, seeing the numbers, keeping the ones that move the metrics, and then everything else, it taught you something. So now we have like a vision of like, well, the direction that we want to go in. We get pushback on this, right? Or I get pushback on this. And they're fair. They're fair pushbacks. And I wanted to share a little bit about how I kind of address these. The typical ones that I hear are going to be around like data and production data when you are prototyping. At the end of the day, you need to set standards and I guess rules for how you're going to utilize this type of prototype. I use demo data, I use mass data, or in some instances, if it's an internal tool, it's okay to use some of that production data. But we just need to clarify and label what these tools actually are as we're building them. The next one's around like demos creating a false confidence. Kind of a similar idea. Like if we go into this, we need to set some rules around what is it trying to prove out. We can't say that the prototype's going to solve all questions. We need to have it at least try to answer one. And my rule of thumb is to always make sure that we have some version of an experiment or test that's going to follow what this prototype is setting out for. The last question here is around like, the culture of docs and how we need docs for approval. I mean, I'm in the same boat. And I'm in no way advocating to skip the doc entirely. I am just suggesting that we change the order, that we prototype first to get that clarity, to get the validation, and then we can document to teach and to record what decisions we make after that. So there's a few tools that I tend to leverage the most. We're going to see some familiar brands here. I'm at the end of the day, like AI tools aren't magic, right? But they are leverage. And the way I want you to start thinking about these tools is if each one of these could cut out a meeting, a doc, or a dependency that you use to slow down and try and use them or experiment with them. So what am I using to build these MVPs and prototypes? It really just depends on the problem. But here is my shortlist. It's Cursor, N8N, Lovable, and I think I threw in like Figma Make. If you're not familiar, Cursor is an AI-assisted IDE, basically like a code writing tool, but doesn't mean that it's only for developers. Basically allows you to read repos, use your files in context, and give a tiny scaffold, some clear prompting, and it spits back some working code, your language of choice, and you can kind of work with it to refactor. I recently built a copy to HTML converter with Cursor. Is basically we had this problem of, we have a ton of emails in copy docs, and we needed to convert them to HTML, and we didn't have time to do this when we have dozens and dozens of emails that we're trying to produce. So instead of scoping this like 6-week build potentially, I sat down for a week using Cursor, hack together what became like this GitHub repo that we use that has a set of cursor rules, contextualizes like component libraries and all of our messaging guidelines. And now we're able to take those lifecycle copy docs and convert them into HTML emails. Another tool that I wanted to talk about was N8N. It's a codeless editor, so think Zapier, Workato. Uh, but I think they do a better job of the out-of-box tool for building AI workflows, and more specifically AI agents. So you can drag a few nodes in, add some prompts, connect your LLMs, your databases, and probably within 20 or so minutes, you can have a call and response interaction with an AI agent. And it's a little bit more than just like a wrapper on top of GPT. I use this personally for, our enrichment tools, some personalizing copy, uh, that validating hypothesis example, basically all of the if X then Y automations that make these MVPs behave like products. So instead of having to ask a data engineering for a custom pipeline, you can wire up an N8N workflow and pull usage data, enrich context, and then generate some Slack alerts in probably a few hours, not overly complex. The last one, which I'm sure Product Drive has heard plenty of, is Lovable. I consider this the give me a starter app now button. So you don't have to start from scratch. It's good for creating quick interactive prototypes. Um, I've built a few examples, typically as like pre-validation, almost purely for high fidelity mockup in a way to get kind of what I'm envisioning out on paper. And then I actually I don't think I've ever spent or had the amount of credits to fully vibe code out something end to end with Lovable, but the tools that I'm comfortable with, I tend to go and start with like a Lovable, get a visual for what I think I want, and then bring that into a cursor and help refine from there. But it's super simple to use, super easy. And then I use it for a lot of like internal or early design validation. And of course, like the prototypes that you're building with these tools, they aren't perfect, but at least they're shipped, and then they're shipped within a few hours of work. That's the shift. A few hours of prompting beats a few weeks of process. And of course, this is a limited list. And in my experience, there's tools for just about any kind of prototyping you would need done. I even looked at slide AI tools, like building slides for some of these presentations. So they exist, and they're all really good at different things. So my recommendation is just give yourself some time every week to experiment with those tools. Uh, you don't have to use these exact tools. Just find the ones that make building and shipping MVPs faster than writing. I wanted to clarify something because what we're not saying, we're saying maybe no more strategy or PRDs as the first step. But we're not saying don't write. Just because we killed the docs doesn't mean we're killing writing. Writing definitely still matters. It always will sharpen our thinking. But now writing's job is kind of the first step is to get us to build with AI. So write prompts, right? There is a science to that. I'm sure we've all experimented with it today. But yeah, once you get there, you'll find that the amount of time that you spent in those few hours prompting will have expedited the few weeks of ironing out a process that would have ultimately given you an MVP anyways. What I will recommend is that even though we're like shifting where we do all of our writing, one of the primary things you still need to consider is like taking record of. So yes, I'm going to use Cursor to build out a prototype for HTML converter, but I still need to document this. I still need to be able to record what worked and share what we're doing next. So that still all exists. And finally, I just think the main mantra here is just ship more MVPs, right? Ship, share, repeat, and then you can document what worked, but only after it's real. And if you want to make impact, I encourage you, implore you, whatever the word is, stop polishing slides and ship more prototypes. I tell my growth marketing peers this all the time, that we got to stop sitting on it and we have to start shipping it. And my take is docs don't make money, slides don't create growth, but shipping does. You don't need the perfect idea. You just need reps, maybe 10 scrappy MVPs, and one will hit. You'll find your win. So I want you to think before you write your next doc, stop. You should close that doc, and I want you to build the damn thing. So ship more MVPs, and that's the whole game. Thank you guys so much for your time, and appreciate it. I think we're going to do questions here.
All right. Thanks so much, Jacob. That was great. I don't have any questions here, but we do have a few that we had collected before the event. So when an MVP reveals unexpected results, how do you decide whether to double down, pivot, or shut it down?
Unexpected results. Yeah, I mean, hopefully the unexpected results were good. But I think the implication there is that they would be bad. I've had both experiences personally. I think it's kind of at that point knowing when you should seek additional validation. If we're talking like pure experiment and the results were net negative, I mean, just drop it. You didn't invest too much resources. The sunken cost fallacy doesn't really apply here. It's like move on or build variation. So that's something else that you can do in these tools is, because it's so quick to build one, why not build 2 or 3 variations of the same idea? That in itself can help reduce some of that uncertainty, or at least give you optionality on what to do next. But yeah, that's like a general experimentation question, right?
Yeah.
And how we approach it.
Okay. What advice would you give teams at larger organizations where shipping quickly is harder to due to bureaucracy and compliance hurdles?
Well, I've done it. So personally, you tend like at these larger organizations, you tend to invest more time in like the people management side of things, meaning like managing up, managing down, sideways, left, right, what have you. It's build good relationships with people and get good trust with others. My recommendation, I think it just sits with the like, go build the prototype that you wish you could go and mess with, because they can't argue with something that's working. They can argue that they shouldn't invest the time now, but they won't be able to argue that it doesn't do anything, right? So
Yeah,
you can also go get that validation, and the larger the company, the harder it is sometimes to get access to customers. But if you have like a council group or something, some small group of users that have been asking for this, reach out to them and get their opinion on what this could look like and get some pre-validation that way.
Awesome. All right. Well, we don't have any further questions, Jacob. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and enjoy the rest of Product Drive 2025.
Thank you, guys.
Have a
Bye.
good one. Bye.